produce offensive noise, vibration, smoke, electrical interference, dust, odors, or heat, and the home occupation shall be completely contained within the dwelling. And I didn't put it on here, but I'll also note that in Article 3, general provisions, we have a general rule that says you can't produce, noise, vibration, etc., right, under nuisances. So that's what's in our existing zoning. I'm not sure, maybe there's something else that deals with home occupations. I couldn't find it. Okay, so here's the proposal. Here's what I'm proposing that we consider changing. And there's two pieces to it. The first one is in Article 2, Districts A, which is RA1, 1, which is permitted use, is B. So that first piece that I read that's in our current zoning, I'm talking about replacing that with the following. So this is under permitted uses. Home occupations and home-based businesses subject to the following conditions. 1. The property owners of record, managers, or lessee shall live in any structure used as a bed and breakfast. 2. Adequate off-street parking with safe ingress and egress of vehicles shall be available. 3. External storage of occupational equipment and supplies shall be screened from the view of abutters and the right-of-way. 4. The number of persons engaged in the on-site operation of any one or combination of home occupations and home-based businesses shall not be more than 4, excluding the residents. Item 5. The residential agricultural character of the district shall be maintained. 6. The home occupations and/or home-based businesses shall remain limited in scope and shall be clearly incidental and secondary to the residential use of the property. 7. A home occupation or home-based business is an accessory use by the residents of the property and shall be secondary to the residential use of the property. A primary owner or operator of any home occupation or home-based business shall be a property owner of record or lessee of the lot where the on-site operations of the home occupation or home-based business are conducted. In addition, this primary owner or operator shall reside in the residence or accessory dwelling unit located on the lot where the on-site operations of the home occupation or home-based business are conducted. If no dwelling exists on the lot, this primary owner or operator shall reside on and be a property owner of record or lessee of a lot abutting the lot where the on-site operations of the home occupation or home-based business are conducted. And 8, no more than 6 square feet of signboard shall be used to advertise activities conducted on the premises. Signboard may be two-sided. And then the second change would be in Article 3 General Provisions, item E on page 9 of 53. Delete the part of that relates to the sign. So delete, persons who conduct home occupations shall be allowed 1 signboard no greater than 6 square feet to advertise activities conducted on the premises. The sign may be two-sided.
Delete that.
Delete that, because that's being moved into item 8 above.
I'm listening to you, not reading.
Okay. So there's a bunch of stuff there, right? And so I put down some notes here that I'd like to go through just in terms of what I was thinking, because that's probably what you're thinking right now. What the hell is he thinking? So item 1, I tried to keep the changes small, and so I think you'll see that there's a bunch of sentences that are just pulled straight out, just maybe reorganized a little bit, like related to bed and breakfast and safe ingress and egress and so on. I tried to remove any perceived limitations on what is allowed by taking the examples out and putting the word business in. I don't think this changes what is permitted, but I think it makes it more clear that you are allowed to run almost any kind of business here in town. The main limitation should not be what kind of business that you're running, but rather the scope of the impact it has on your neighbors and the community. And the second point, I tried to reduce the burden to screen stuff by specifying that stuff only needs to be screened from view from outside the property and not how it's screened. Because our current zoning says it has to be screened. And, well, it could be that it's 500 feet from anything that anyone can see without being on your property, but you still have to screen it according to our zoning. And you have to use either dense vegetation or a fence. You can't use, I don't know what else you use, but anyway, just sort of trying to make it less restrictive. to the extent possible. I think this is consistent with the spirit of the existing zoning, but allows the owner more flexibility. Item 3. I tweaked the 4-employee rule to only count those working on site. A member of the public at one of our meetings was concerned that the 4-employee limit might keep them from running a business that employs 10 people that work in their own homes. I think that we should be allowing that. Likewise, someone should be able to run a business from his house where he and a bookkeeper/assistant work in his house, and everyone else is working in the field, even if they come to his house briefly at the start or end of the shift. Number 4. I tried to make it clear that the home occupations are okay in conjunction with the residence, but do not make any allowance for home occupation in conjunction with a non-residence farm. So that's one of the things that's not clear, and we can go through, talk about this more later if people are interested in talking about this, but it's not clear in our current zoning that you have to actually live there in order to have home occupation. So somebody could own a lot here, not live in town, and run a business. I think maybe under our current zoning. And actually I think that's one thing that we maybe should make more, either more clear or more restrictive if that is actually allowed. I think if you're gonna have a home occupation, it should be your home. And so but that's maybe people have different thoughts on that, but that's what that one's about. That one long point that went on and on is really related to just making sure that somebody actually lives near where they're
responsible.
And that they're not there, you know, it's a residential zone, right? It should be primary for the residents or agriculture. But I also make the point there that it's okay, I believe, according to our zoning, it's okay to have a farm that you don't live at. So somebody could own 20 acres here in town, not live in town, and farm it. I think that's allowed under our zoning, and I think that's reasonable.
What kind of farming are you thinking of? Are you thinking of crops or are you thinking of animals?
It doesn't matter. It could be trees. I don't care.
Well, I just had a thought that came across my head because this tangentially came up a long time ago. But Cliff said something about livestock that is not supervised. And it was in a conversation not related to this. And I've always wondered, perhaps code enforcement officers, are residents allowed to have, like say for example you have a woodlot, and you wanted to run some pigs on that woodlot. You had it all fenced in, it was nice and safe, pigs weren't running away. Is the owner responsible for that woodlot maintaining those animals all the time? I mean, is there any impact?
Well, you have animal control, but you have regulations on animal husbandry that is enforceable. You know, so you can't just cut them loose.
I mean, they can't just be running all over the neighborhood. Yes.
We had a very interesting case.
I'll finish my answer later.
I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
At the Prior's Farm, they were running cattle on the pasture. I'm using this because everybody knows where it is. There's a cemetery there. The cattle got loose into the cemetery and destroyed some of the walls, and I mean, they were just walking around looking for something to eat, but there was a mess. And the question came up, who's responsible to fix that cemetery or the graveyard? The graveyard is one of our historic graveyards. The owner of the cattle was not the owner of the pasture, it was Mr. Pryor. The owner of the cattle was a selectman in Ospey, who refused to pay for the fixing of the graveyard and the walls. It wasn't going to be that much money, but it was just on it. But the point is, eventually he had to pay because our selectman came down hard on it. It was a very interesting case. So it's the owner of the animal who is responsible for what the animal does.
Unless, of course, the pasture jumps up and does damage.
No, in this, I mean, we were afraid there were going to be bones coming off that graveyard.
Oh, well, that's something.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting case. I mean,
yeah, it is.
and I know I was just throwing you for a loop in your presentation.
That's okay.
But the thought is, if somebody owns a piece of land and does some sort of agriculture on it that involves animals that are unattended, I mean that and they don't live in town, you know.
So I've got 2 thoughts on that. Well, 3 thoughts. First of all, Booney I think is correct that the owner of an animal is responsible for any damage that animal does. I researched that because I had chickens crossing the road.
Now we know why the chickens crossed the
And we
road.
also know why I have a chicken coop that's 1,000 feet from the road.
Ah, I see, yes.
During the summer. Anyway, a second thought there is that it doesn't matter, having experience with animals, it doesn't matter if you live there or not.
Mm-hmm.
The animals are going to escape and they're going to wreak havoc. That's just part of farming. Okay.
I tend to agree.
And my third thought on that is that we have adopted RSA 2134A as our definition of agriculture, and therefore, and farms, farming, etc. And therefore, you can, I believe, my interpretation is, again, I'm not a lawyer, but my interpretation is that you can have a farm that does not involve a residence. And I believe that that is okay under our zoning.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? You cannot have a farm.
You can have a farm.
Okay.
A farm.
2134A says you can have a farm. It
If you read the definition of what a farm is,
right.
you'll see that it does not require a house. It can, if there's a house there, the dwelling is included as part of the farm.
Right.
A dwelling can be part of a farm, it's not required to be part of a farm.
Right.
And I'll give you an example. Clifton, when he owned the 2-acre lot next to me, didn't live there, there's no house there. He had pigs there. And I think that's perfectly allowed under our zoning and the state's definition of agriculture that we've got.
And you're leasing the property at that point.
He owned it. He owned the property.
It's no different
But he
than
didn't live
leasing a
there.
pasture from somebody or.
Yeah.
You know. Okay, so I'm sorry, Ed, you were going to say something a moment ago.
Pretty much got covered.
All right.
Yeah, the owner of the animal is responsible.
Right. But I just wanted to think about that before we got any further. So I
Yes.
threw you totally off track. Sorry.
But the point that this proposal would say that just because you've got a farm doesn't mean you can do a home occupation on that lot. You actually have to have a residence on that lot or an adjacent lot, and you got to live there.
So that's almost logically breaking farming away from home occupation.
It's just, all I'm saying is that the way I've written it is that the home occupation is a secondary use to a residence. It's a secondary residential use, not a secondary agricultural use.
Okay.
Now, if we, I mean, it's very easy to change that meaning, right? And if we as a group thought that we want people to be able to have a farm, a non-residence farm, and be able to run a business, a non-agricultural business out of that, it's a very easy wording change to allow that as a permitted use. I had to pick something, so I picked making it not, I think, but it's something we should think about, whether we want to allow that or not allow that. And it's one of the things that if you read our current zoning, I don't think you can tell.
But in reality, we do have non-residential agricultural properties in town, like the Berry Farm up on Clark. I mean, we really do have these things going on.
Right, and I think it's reasonable and doable. Okay.
Please. Okay. You have the floor.
Number 5. So the no/discussion is generating discussion too. Number 5. I changed the wording to maintain the character of the zone rather than the property. So if you look at the current zoning and proposed zoning, the current zoning says that a home occupation can't change the residential character of the property, which means that a strict interpretation of that would be that if some random person walked up in front of your house, they wouldn't be able to tell by looking or listening or whatever that you had anything going on there other than living there as a residence. And I think that's very restrictive. And I personally think that we should be maintaining the character of the zone. And if there's, if a house has some variance from being purely residential in appearance, I think that's okay. If we as a group think that we should allow that, again, easy wording change, right? And I'm open to that, but I think that I think that would be overly restrictive. As I say here, this loosens the restrictions a little. A particular property may deviate from strictly residential agricultural as long as it doesn't affect the area as a whole. Number 6, I added a clause that says this should be a small secondary use. What constitutes small is subjective, and that was intentional. I don't think it is feasible to quantify this. This will give the selectman or their agent clear authority to use their discretion to limit the size of their business if it becomes necessary. So my idea there is that almost any business